Hello and welcome to another episode of Infrastructure Matters. It's just me and Camberley today. I shouldn't say just me and Camberley. It's
Yes.
Camberley and I. Hello, Camberley.
Good morning. And in Krista, we have to tell everybody where Krista is.
She's
She's off
planning.
working on wedding plans.
I know the big day looms, and she's got to take some time to organise it.
It's like,
So
wow, she just ditches us for wedding plans?
weddings matter.
Priorities, girl.
Weddings matter. Infrastructure doesn't, obviously. So packed week as always this week. We've got IBM earnings, them making a big acquisition, Google earnings. I was at Oracle this week at their database analyst summit. Rubric IPO'd, IBM launched a bunch of storage stuff. So we've got a lot to cover. So let's dive straight in. I'll go to you first, Camberley. I think maybe joint, if not the biggest news of the week, Rubric coming out with an
Who?
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 Small little company with a $5.6 billion valuation. So I know Krista's been tracking this and sort of called that it would come this week. So I gave her props on X that she did a good job of calling that. But what's the story?
Well, Rubrik is one of the darlings of the data protection industry, which we've been talking ad infinitum over for the last year. As a note, why in the world would data protection be taking off? Well, it's because of cybersecurity. What else do you want to talk about? Cybersecurity or AI this week? Which one do you want to talk about?
Yeah.
Anyway, but they have been. They started out. They point themselves as a security firm. But the core of where they came from is really the data protection side of the house, and they were one of the guys that came out with this scale out data protection capability, scale out security, kind of the new technology that's hitting the market, and that the other companies have fallen suit in terms of bringing their offerings out as well. So we actually expected one of their competitors come out earlier than they did, but they're busy acquiring Veritas, or acquiring parts of Veritas. So Rubrik came out here, big valuation.
5.6 billion's not small beer.
No, raised around $750 million of money, so they have got a nice cash cow there. Suspect we're going to see them over the next 2 years. Just work to sell, get placements, get positions out in the market. They maybe with the 750 million plus that they raised, they'll be acquiring some security firms.
Yeah, I was going to add that. I mean, that was the one that stood out to me. That's a decent sized war chest now. Do you see them kind of doing a bunch of tuck in, kind of smaller acquisition? Do you see them going big on somebody? What's your
I think
call?
they will because they've positioned themselves as a security firm. And
Mhm.
if Krista was here, I'd be turning it over to her because she's been watching them in detail. But and security firms, and there's a lot of other pieces to security. I've talked about this before where security has traditionally been this nature of the CISO. Data protection has been the nature of the IT operations. They've merged together because of the issues with cybersecurity. It's the last point of defense is whether or not you've got your data encrypted, secure, air gapped, right, and you can get it back. So there's a lot of pieces in between. Between how you have how you're protecting your door to come into your house, as opposed to how you protect the stuff that is in your house. And so there's lots to still be done. And as we continue this progress, or as the bad guys continue their knowledge, expertise, using AI in particular, and being able to spoof and all the other things they're doing,
Mhm.
the money continues to march into this market and be spent because you can't afford to lose your data. And you can't afford to be shut down for a month, you
Yeah.
know?
I mean,
Um,
for me, as a CISO, it must be really hard to not green light a project. So a vendor comes and says, "Hey, I found this hole, this thing that you haven't fixed." I don't know how, as a CISO, you say no to that because
well, it's hard.
I mean, so is that a tailwind just overall for where these guys are? Because you don't want to be the CISO that says, "Hey, I didn't buy that tool, and now we've got hacked by the thing that that tool would have protected us against." So, uh, is that just a dynamic that it's really hard to say no in that market? I
I
just
think so. And I think that's why you're seeing the increase of people doing the auditing. You're seeing the increase of white hats. Actually, I was at a dinner party last weekend and spent, a good portion of the evening talking to a white hat who was basically telling me stuff. He wasn't telling me who he was doing this, but the CISO and the CIO are going to walk in Monday morning and have a really bad day, is what I figured, because he'd gotten in pretty easily, and if it's a very large company, it was a very large company. He said, how large I don't know, but stupid things like not changing your passwords.
yeah,
You know,
there's a guy I know in the
I mean,
mainframe.
there's a lot of really, really crazy stuff that's how things get broken in, and then there's some really scary stuff of
Mhm.
how things are getting broken in using AI, and that you use it for take somebody's image, have a Zoom call with a sysadmin image, his image or her image, that calls into the call center and says, I need to have my password redone, except for it's not really that person, it's their image.
Or a deep fake of video of that.
It's a deep fake image, and it gets taken over. And
It's
it's like,
crazy.
that's one scary piece of doing. So the innovation that has to happen continually happen as they get smarter, and this is where Rubrik is sitting right there in that security space, and looking at how we do things differently.
Well, and
So,
that leads into that valuation. I think people see there's still room to grow in that space. There's still growth to
mhm.
capture. There's still the TAM is expanding probably in that space. If we had Krista on, she could tell us that. But that's what leads into that. I mean, it's not a great season for IPO right now. So for Rubrik to come out at that level of valuation is pretty impressive. So keeping a thread going here, let's talk about. I'll do IBM earnings. I know you've got some stuff, particularly about storage. Um, so solid results from IBM, 1% overall up. They're starting to get back onto growth on a consistent basis. I was expecting more. I've got to admit, I think as a lot of people on the street were as well. I think some good numbers within the numbers. So software is up 5.5. Hybrid cloud within that, good growth within Red Hat. Consulting was up. One thing that stood out for me, and I always look for these numbers, the mainframe numbers, how Ross Maury and Jose Castano are getting that business to grow at 4% and beat their peers within IBM this deep into a product cycle. Kudos to those guys. I spoke to, I texted them both to congratulate them.
Do they
Solid.
have any sales jobs open for that?
One thing, sales has got worse over there since I left, obviously, but it's kind of making me look bad that they're doing so well since I left. But I mean, all joking aside, what are they now? 8 quarters into the Z16 cycle. That's very deep into that. So I mean, I think long term bullish. I think they're probably at least 3 or 4 quarters out from a new box. So if there is still some growth to come. I think 1% there was, technology lifecycle services was down. The big news, obviously, that broke this week that they decided to break as part of earnings, and I'm getting briefed on it later on today, is the acquisition of HashiCorp for $35 a share. This is going to be really interesting for me. I'm digging in with Keith Townsend. They're gonna IBM's gonna own the open source kind of support model, the enterprise versions of both Terraform and Ansible. So that's going to be interesting, I think, going
Wow.
forward. So the two kind of approaches for how you do
But
enterprise.
IBM is getting that, not Red Hat.
That's the bit that's going to be interesting for me. I don't know where HashiCorp's going to fit within IBM structure. The really obvious place for me is for it to sit alongside Red Hat in some type of combined entity, just because the go-to-market model's the same, the support model, the structure. It's an open source business that's gone public and then been bought into IBM. Or do they keep it separate and run it entirely separate? Don't know. Not a lot of detail yet. We're getting briefed later on today, so by Rob Thomas. So it's going to be interesting to find out. IBM Think is in a few weeks' time, so I'd imagine there'll be a bunch more announcements there. Rubrik will probably be there in some shape or form. I mean, obviously, it's IBM announcing their intention to acquire. The assets haven't transferred yet, so there'll be some clean room stuff. There'll be some I don't know whether there'll be a lot of regulatory focus on this. Don't know what HashiCorp's exposure to Europe is. Don't know whether they're exposed that much to China. I'd imagine this will be a US regulator-driven approval. Don't know. Don't know. I mean, the only question for me is Terraform and Ansible being in the same. Whether the regulators will understand that or not, don't know.
Which may be why they have to keep it separate. But we'll see.
Well, then there's an open source way to do Terraform. That project came from Google, so I don't know. So I think IBM's very buttoned up when it comes to regulatory stuff. I don't envisage any problems. I don't think IBM would either. So it's going to be interesting to see that one play out. Going to go deep on that next week. I'm going to write a detailed research note, but really interesting. I think for me, it proves that IBM's further doubling down on its hybrid cloud space. So it's nice to see them be doing the Watson X stuff and the hybrid cloud stuff. They've been very Watson X focused. I mean, obviously they bought Aptio not so long back. So Arvind led the Red Hat acquisition under Ginny. He's done Aptio, which is another multi-billion-dollar acquisition. Now doing HashiCorp. Really, really trying to get IBM onto a software-driven growth story. But they also made some announcements in the storage space this week. So we'll segue to those.
Yeah. So a couple of really cool announcements. Audrey Donnell, who is one of their product managers, went through something called Storage Assurance Perpetual. Okay, so many years ago, Pure did a disruptive kind of piece in the market with their Evergreen offering. The Evergreen basically saying that if you have the high-end support, the top premier support, you will get a replacement controller on top of your drives in the future, and that you can refresh that, and so you can speed up your drives that are below it, and the software and all that kind of stuff. So kind of keeping an evergreen of your environment, keep your drives in place. You don't have to migrate them to the next area, which is a pain in the butt anyway. So the issues with IBM is a little bit more trickier because they weren't using they've never used off the shelf. They have their flash core modules, and in their flash core modules that they developed with Micron, there's some really unique technology in there. And so just changing out a controller isn't enough to stay current in the market.
Not a controller and dumb drives. There's actually some value added drives.
So those flash core modules have AI-enabled ransomware detection. And in there, using the FPGAs, the ASICs that they have in these things, every I/O is getting scanned that's coming through. They have data reduction offload that they've done. They have done, and there are a couple of other things that are in there, but those are the two big ones that are coming off of where typically those are being done in the controller. So how do you keep somebody current in migrating forward when you have to play with both of those things? And also for anybody that's dealt with finance, you have to deal with depreciation and everything else. So what their Storage Assurance Perpetual program is doing is recognizing that I have controllers and high-up drives. And how do I keep those current? When you're under their premium support service there, you will have multiple triggers during the lifespan up to like 8 years of where you can refresh into the more current drives of whatever they've done to soup up the drives, or refresh with the software, or refresh with the controller over those 8-year period. So you're going to stay within that currency within their market. And then you have the ability to pay on a monthly basis upfront, pay it all up front, pay on a monthly basis. The monthly rate won't change over this course of 8 years, which is pretty significant.
It's only just consumption. If you consume more, will it go up? Is it a consumption based?
Well, if you're buying some new items, yeah, that's going to go up.
Yeah.
You're going to obviously have it, what the current rate is whenever you buy another box or whatever drives or whatever is going on. So yes, so I think what they've put together, and there's a lot of moving parts in there whenever you have put a complex program in there, and they've done a great job of thinking through all the caveats. So we went on the briefing call, we kind of were poking all around, where's the weak spot in this, and we really didn't, they really.
I can just imagine a bunch of storage analysts torturing an IBM product manager on that call.
Exactly what we were doing.
And I can just imagine you all looking for the weakness in that. I love those calls when it becomes a team effort with a bunch of other analysts from other firms.
Right. But it was actually just us, but it was still, we're the ones that kind of dig into, we're known for digging into the corner cases. Kudos to the team, because I know getting anything, and you know this, getting any through IBM legal takes Herculean effort.
I've got some stuff back here somewhere from that back in the day.
So it's just, I know this has been in the works for many years, and I heard about these started way back.
From a competitive landscape perspective, do you think it gets them where they need to be?
Yeah, it does.
You think it puts them up? Because I know sort of Vast and Pure and some of those guys have been kind of, and it's easy for those, I say easy, it's easier to innovate when you've not got as much sort of product debt, technical debt. It's easy to come in with a flash piece of, blank piece of paper. Do you think they're there, IBM?
Yeah, they're there. And the big push for IBM now is new placements. IBM's got such an engine. You roll a new box out, and all you have to do is go replace everything that's out there, and you've got a very, very large market. But that really doesn't grow you over time. It just is a long-term management of your assets. So the big thing for them is that they need to push on a real strong new placement, new opportunity positioning in their systems. Now, they did roll out a new low-end box. They've got the 5300 is replacing the 5200, so that's their low-end box. It's a 1U box. It's about 400,000 IOPS. Craziness that this thing goes into it's a 64 gigabit fiber channel. It's like, okay, so I've got a 1U box that's got a fiber channel. Who the heck is going to do this? Well, what's going on is that you're going to have larger companies are going to use these 1U boxes and scale out with the 1U.
Just building block them, basically.
They're going to build.
So it's a nice low entry start point for an SMB customer, but it's also an enterprise play because you can just rack them and stack them.
Yeah. So it's both Ethernet and fiber channel, but it's kind of like, okay, so you still have fiber channel on this, and that's kind of where it's going. It's servicing those clients that are using those systems for that. They do one of the things. What IBM does is, I think it's similar to what they do with the mainframe, is they look for where they could use cores, FPGAs, ASICs, and that kind of stuff to offload and speed up the process. So one of the things they've done within the controller, if you will, they are using one of the CPU cores to help speed up data services. So you're offloading the I/O, right, and letting the I/O go hammer over there, and the things like replication and safeguard copy, which is mirroring kind of stuff, is offloaded. And those are things that can bring down a controller and really hurt your performance.
So looking for a complete sort of balanced system design.
Right. Predictable, balanced. So I think that it's, so they've got some really great offering, great offering here. Again, it's a question of how they're going to go out there and selling. The third
Well,
area that
that's always been IBM's challenge. IBM's very well populated in those huge, big enterprises, the Fortune 500. The sort of largest enterprises, that probably those top 2,000 customers globally. Can they get into the SMB space? Can they get into the fast emerging tech space? That's always the sort of question. So it sounds like this new box and this new form factor gives them a proposition there. So can they get there from a go-to-market model is the question, I suppose.
yeah, and they're all complete channel, pretty
Hmm.
much. The last thing I will mention is their virtualized product, which is SVC. If you know SVC, which is their
Hmm.
storage virtualization product, anything that's run SVC, which would be flash systems and some of the other pieces, they've done some things to super enhance their replication, and their mirroring and their metro capability. I don't have the chart here, chart numbers on terms of performance and the easing of the hit. So instead of this hockey stick that you tend to see whenever you do a mirror or those kind of things, it's this even flow without, looks like it's almost close to the same performance you have if you don't have mirroring or if you don't have their policy-based replication. Pretty significant. I want to see more on it. I want to see more of the performance about, under what conditions are we really seeing that kind of
Hmm.
performance? How is it hitting? But those are things, that's the reason why people don't use that technology, for high availability or, just DR, is because it brings systems down. So if they've done some tweaking and code development there to make that a whole lot better, it makes it very, very attractive. And if the sellers know how to position this, it's meaningful, because we're not just talking about replicating to another site. You can be using the cloud because they've got SVC running up in the cloud as well. So
SVC, SVC's long been the crown jewel for me in IBM storage. Tough proposition to position, especially for a channel partner, but really fantastic technology, I think. I mean, we're going back, well, how long have they had SVC now? Over a couple of decades, probably.
yeah, but it's um, locally we have a what used to be IBM's site, now it's a Kyndryl site, and
Hmm.
I've known friends that have worked at that Kyndryl site, and they've always used SVC at the Kyndryl site to manage these very, very large environments that are located there, for their DR site. And they come back and they say, it's just amazing what we can do and how many terabytes or petabytes now that a single person can manage because of
Yeah.
this layer. So it's a huge, if it gets implemented, it's a huge value proposition for the IT operations space. So
Yeah, for sure. Um, so
we better rush to the other pieces because we're like eating up
yeah,
time.
yeah, you we'll get you started on storage, and you can just keep on going. We could do at least half an hour on storage.
You need to cut
Um,
me off.
IBM also launched a Power Edge box. I'm going to be writing some stuff about that, bringing power systems closer to the edge. Well, we haven't got time to go into it in depth. I think this can be interesting for some of those edge AI workloads, but I'm going to be writing a research note on that, so we'll link to that one. We spent a lot of time on our IBM today. So moving forward, Google announced earnings. Well, obviously Alphabet, the parent for Google, announced earnings.
Mhm.
I think up 15% at the Alphabet level. I think the one that stood out for me was that Google Cloud was up 28% to almost 10 billion for the quarter. That's a significant number now. Google's tracking probably faster growth, or at least kind of in the same levels of growth as AWS and Microsoft. Um, we covered Google Cloud Next and their conference on why that is. I think the AI proposition makes a lot of sense. It's a very coherent, well structured message. I think what we're seeing is sales execution from Google. That's the thing I'm tracking.
Mhm.
Are they able to execute in the enterprise? Obviously, a fantastic organization with product led growth. I think 12 services over a billion users, 5 services over 2 billion users. You don't have to explain to sort of what YouTube is to anybody these days. Everybody gets it. Consumer-led, consumer-focused, product-led growth obviously got it nailed. Really strong ad business and all the things that go around it, the G Suite and kind of the workplace stuff, obviously getting traction. Can they build a enterprise sales go-to-market sort of strategy that is equally good as they've got from a product point of view? That's the bit I'm watching. 28% year-on-year growth of Google Cloud means they're starting to do something right. Can they
Well,
continue to execute? That's kind of my question.
yeah, and that was the interesting thing about Tom Curran coming over there from Oracle,
Hmm.
because we all know how well Oracle can execute on the sales side, and on the and so it's I think it's probably, and I haven't watched it like you have, but I'm sure it's taken a while to change over to a different sales motion and the sales people that you need, which are enterprise, account based,
Yep.
senior level people selling into the higher echelons of the company and positioning it, as well as the technical capabilities that they have. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, we met with a couple of their senior execs who they've come in from. They'd hired an exec from Microsoft to lead sort of global enterprise sales. I think
Mhm.
it's that person. I was chatting to a former colleague about the person who's running sales for Europe in Google. Very sales driven, very focused, very enterprise driven. We need more of that type of person to be at
Mhm.
Google, just across the entire organization, and we're going to continue to see numbers like 28% year on year growth for Google Cloud. So that's I think the market needs three strong players for hyperscale cloud. The other one I would talk about is Oracle. I was at Oracle's database analyst summit this week. They took 30 of us out to San Francisco to wine and dine us and tell us about what they're doing. Really, really came away from that event with, I've always been impressed with Exadata. It's a great platform on
Mhm.
prem. It perfectly tuned for doing Oracle workloads on prem. I think what is more impressive for me is how they've made that a truly cloud at customer, cloud connected through into Exascale in Oracle Cloud, being able to take that workload and really architect it to be able to go whether you want it on prem, whether you want it in a sovereign cloud deployment with Alloy, or whether you want it as a full cloud deployment in something like Exascale, being able to take that one workload and then build around it. The other piece that they were really keen to tell us is obviously they've got a strong track record with Oracle database workloads, but infrastructure workloads. They popped up a couple of slides there. Whether this is entry level pricing to go grab market share, or whether I can believe what they're saying, that they've got some secret sauce that means they can be cheaper. They were 200% cheaper. Now, obviously, you can pick a workload and make anything look better than your peers if you try hard enough. And I'm going to be digging down on this. I'm going to be going to hopefully to their OCI analyst summit in a couple of weeks. But really interesting that Oracle was positioning that they're cheaper for pure IaaS. So I need to go digging on that. But on first blush, they put up, I think it was Uber, have moved a lot of their infrastructure onto Oracle just purely for IaaS, and they moved it because of cost. So I don't think any of us would normally associate Oracle with being cheap for something, but they're positioning that they are for IaaS.
But you know what? They know how to optimize for their environment. And that's a big deal. I mean, they've been running these high-end transactional database environments, high availability, high capability, that's what they're focused on. And when you're focused on something, versus a other clouds tend to be more generalist. I've got SMB I've got to take care of. I have this kind of application. I have this application, this application. You also see in the clouds, they tend to ship, you know, beta products. They announce that beta and then they build on top of that beta to build on top of the capabilities to roll out. And that's by design. And we've seen that from
Hmm.
most of the clouds doing that. That is not an Oracle way. When
Mm-hmm.
Oracle ships, Oracle
It's
clients are
bomb proof.
you are expecting it, just like I'm shipping a mainframe. It shouldn't break, and so there's a different type of engineering approach from those two organizations, and that may be what is contributing to their value statement that they're bringing out there, is because they've tuned and tuned and tuned and tuned and tuned for what they do best, as opposed to generalist. I don't know if that's accurate enough, but
I would.
you know,
That certainly came through. It was fascinating as well. Sort of fanboy moment. Larry Ellison joined us for an hour.
I saw that picture.
I got to ask Larry a question.
He looked
Sharp.
like he was on Lanai.
Yeah, I think he
He was
was.
in
I think he
Hawaii.
was. We were trying to work out, people who've seen him before were trying to work out where his background was. But
He definitely had a suntan going on there.
79 years old, sharp as a button, absolutely on it, was telling us about where they're going with their AI strategy, architectural questions, interacting with the room of the 30 brightest and best in the database space. Well, 29 of the best and me. But,
Wait, you are the best, aren't you?
oh, I don't know
Like
about
one
that.
step above me, right?
There was some database experts in the room. To be fair, there was
Yeah,
some
I'm
database
sure.
experts there, but no, I mean, still hands on, deep in the tech, really leaning into his CTO role. So that was fascinating for me. I think the other key takeaway is, with obviously the Cerner acquisition around healthcare, it's going to be fascinating to see what they do to fully embed that from an AI point of view.
That'll be interesting. Okay, so I hadn't thought about that. They've had that for quite some time though now. So
Yeah, I think obviously that, what was Cerner as innovative as Oracle? No, obviously not. They were sort of, I think, infusing Oracle innovation and now AI into Cerner. You're going to start to see a
yeah.
flywheel develop with that business for sure. But we're running late. We're 32 minutes.
Oh my God,
I know it's
you can't
crazy.
hang in for that long.
I'm going to
Thanks,
blame
guys,
it
for
on
hanging
you.
in.
I'm going to blame it on you with all that storage deep tech talk.
Okay, you can
Um,
do that.
But no, fantastic as always. Thanks for joining me on the show today, Camberley. Always good to talk to you. We could wax lyrical about infrastructure for
Oh no,
weeks
we
here.
bore them to death, but there we
Yeah.
go.
So you've been listening to another episode of Infrastructure Matters. Do all that stuff and click and subscribe and share this with your friends. We'll see you next week. Thank you very much for watching.